Even after the war, some of his mother's animosity toward Israel, he was followed into the classroom by Fled, but he was also discovered by something else. A comic Spider-Man, American novels. They became Superman's escape, who was not yet able to read English, although Hetreed anyhow. At 7 years old, he was fluent in Hungarian, Hebrew and he was now surreptitiously picking up English as well, because he wanted to comprehend the heroes in those comics. In a society still recovering from conflict, when there was little food and little hope felt uncommon, those tales provided him something to cling to. His mom didn't discuss her experiences much, but the agony persisted. Haim had begun to notice it more by 1957. Obviously, she was only 14 years old when she was forced into slavery by Nazis, picking potatoes in the fields as troops of served with firearms. She was clothed, crossed, alternating between camps, witnessing the disappearance of any one relative at a time. She didn't have to give a verbal explanation. Her quiet, her excessive caution, and the manner in which she occasionally sobbed without cause, Hem realized that it left him with something, as well, a necessity to never feel helpless, to never allow others to witness his breakage. The Samin 1957, Flora made a choice that would make all the difference. With having very nothing to her name, she and Haim, age 8, departed Israel. They reached Queens, New York, without no family, no money, and no English. His dad remained in the area, got married again and began a new life. Haim never again seen him. His name was Eugene. Clean and began anew. Clean toilsome. He was astounded by TV dinners. However, adjusting wasn't simple. Flora put in a lot of overtime in industries in Brooklyn, sometimes working 15 hours a day. Gene needed to look after himself with nannies, and became familiar with the guidelines of an unfamiliar new world. He visited IA, attended a Jewish school for some time, although he did blend in. After that, he went public school. He received his diploma from Newtown High 1967. Children first made fun of him for how he spoke. His accent gave him the impression that everywhere he went, he was like a stranger. However, he was not broken by it. He made a sale door-to-door cacti. He chose fruit once more, as he had done in Israel. Each and every insult, each denial forced him to try more difficult. He began studying English quicker by reading more and watching TV comics at that point. His fixation with pop culture took off. By 1959, at only 9 years old, he changed his name legally, once more. Gene Clean. This time, had chose Gene based on cowboy performers as Gene Autry. He was totally focused on being American currently, even if he was still a resident of a little apartment beside his mom, and he developed feelings for TV, particularly the Ed Sullivan display. The Beatles' appearance in February 9, 1964, he felt something. That was the life he desired. He desired stage and the celebrity. He desired to experience similar to someone, but he still felt like the poor boy. He even occasionally pretended to be British, mimicking the accents of the Beatles in order to fit. It was popular with girls. He was ungainly, uncertain, navigating the clumsy adjustments of adolescence. However, his charm was growing slowly. In the 60s, Gene accepted any work he could find. Hugh worked slicing meat in butcher shops behind the counter. He was employed at Deli's. Although he only made $1,025 per hour, he saved all of it. The state of poverty had taught him to keep track of every penny. He avoided drinking, alcohol, even He observed that older men became inebriated and careless. He remained alert. It was how he acquired women. He stated it himself. He applied his lucidity while all others lost theirs. He began studying the guitar and practicing all the time. Upon viewing the Beatles on television, Hugh was unable to stop. He started small bands. He began constructing his future while still attending school. In 1968, he visited community college in Sullivan County, earned an associate's degree after studying education. Degree by 1970, even going so far as to teach $675 per week for a Spanish Harlem grade. However, he wasn't passionate about the classroom. Paul Stanley joined him and created the Rainbow Band, which quickly changed his name to Wicked Lester. In 1970 they worked other jobs and performed in clubs at night. Tasks throughout the day. Gan even had a job at a magazine on fashion, and he did translation services that use Hungarian. He learned Spanish and Turkish as occulted from neighbors and babysitters. However, his soul resided in music. He attempted various noises, even recording some songs he wrote on his own. Every one of Thea's he was transferring funds back to his mother, continuing to bear the burden of her surviving and everything that she had lost in 1945. Next came the portion of his story that even his fans were taken aback by. Gene Simmons claims that his virginity ended in 1963, around 14 years old. He was only a child delivering newspapers. One winter before Christmas, in the evening, he rapped on a client's door. She replied while sobbing and was wearing a thin nightgown. She had been married. What came next? Later he explained in depth in his book. It wasn't only the start of his sexual existence. In 1970, Gene Simmons and Paul Stanley collaborated. Brooke, Steve Coronel, Antony Zarella, and Ostra. They established Wicked Lester as a band. The Noise was an odd blend of rock and folk that was born away from the erratic music landscape in the city of New York. By the 15th of October 1972, they had a complete album recorded at Studios Electric Lady, which had been Jimi Hendrix built it. Epic Records had spent a lot of money to make it possible. However, Don Ellis, their A&R director, utterly detested it. He referred to The Noise as too disorganized and peculiar for radio, so he put it away for good. That denial slammed into Gan. He had devoted himself to projects, and it was previously dead it even started. Gan and Paul were enraged. Brought in Ron after firing Steve Coronel Lajak for a brief moment before closing all the way down. Wicked Lester. However, that wasn't the end. Once Kiss turned into Gan and Paul paid $138,000 for Fame. In 1977 to repurchase the vintage Wicked Lester recordings to ensure that they never came out. They were afraid of the elderly. The hard-edged image would be destroyed by sound. Now they were constructing. However, bootlegs later released online, exposing songs like Her and Give Her My Undivided Attention, which later Kiss would re-record without having the original lineup credit. That something was born out of a failed band. Larger. By January of 1973, Paul Gan were carried out by compromise. They discovered Peter Criss placed an ad in Rolling Stone, an experienced drummer from groups such as Lips Delcy as well. He joined right away. Next, Ace Frehley was located via a Village Voice advertisement. Collectively, the four of they came up with something completely original. This would not be your typical rock band. There would be a frantic, extravagant performance using makeup, fire, and a map. Motivated by the shock rock of Alice Cooper and New York's glamorous fashion, they launched Kiss York Dolls. Their January 30th was the date of the first performance, 1973 in Queens, at a tiny club called the Coventry, once known as Popcorn Club. Just three and some of them were the Girlfriends Oft group. However, Gene breathed that night. Fire for the first time on stage. It was a sight no one ever forgot. Absent a own popular song or any MTV airplay, they developed a fan base. Word got out through live performances and fan magazines, not on the radio. In 18 months, in Anaheim Stadium, they were the main attraction. 1974. Later, Gene said that their composition was so peculiar and memorable that it simply ingrained in people's thoughts. It was spreading, and it was strange. Gene invented the monster in 1973, motivated by scary movies such as black comic book characters such as Sabbath. He painted bat wings all over Black Bolt. His eyes began to exhale flames, and on stage, spitting blood. He had discovered the professionals' tricks. As soon as the band initially began experimenting with, they had no actual plan, cosmetics. Gene left for fear. Peter sketched facial hair on Hesse feline face. Ace transformed himself into Olene from space. They were situated before mirrors that paint wildly in an attempt to something that had never been seen before. There were only a dozen people attended the early performances. Crowds at the Coventry varied from 10 to 15 or perhaps less. However, those few people talked as they left. Prior to that, children were using the internet to disseminate the message. According to Gene, it felt odd and sticky. However, it was effective. That fire in Macapo's blood transformed annoyance into a radio wasn't necessary for them. Struck. All they had to do was be not to be forgotten. A man. In August 1973, Kiss performed for a man named Bill Aucoin at the Diplomat Hotel. He had faith in them, thus so much that he pledged to provide them with a record contract in 2 weeks. And he did. They signed with by November 1st. Casablanca Records is a recently established label, operated by Neil Bogart. Peter Criss was really enthusiastic at learning that Heffel off his platform heels. Literally. The group swiftly recorded their first album with producer Eddie's assist. February saw its release, 18th of 1974. At first, sales were slow, 75,000 copies, but the group didn't put an end to it. They performed in more than 300 performances that year. Casablanca Records was almost broke, but Kiss's never-ending tour kept them alive. Neil Bogart had his doubts their cosmetic trick initially, but when he was aware that the throngs were growing, was at work. Later, nevertheless, it became a cult favorite, particularly in Europe, where it was Attack of the Phantoms as the new name. Thendiver demonstrated that Gene's ego was simply too large to be stopped. The same old four bandmates recorded solo albums that year. Albums on the 18th of September, Gene's record sold more than some of Kiss's real group records. It featured odd covers such as a star and a guest star wished Cher and Bob Seger's appearances. His compositions discussed radioactivity and warped imaginations. In the meanwhile, Kiss Dynasty was published on May 23, 1979. Within You I Was Created for Love, reaching on the Billboard charts, number 11. It surpassed 1 million copies sold and went platinum over 5 nations. However, the disco influence damaged their reputation. Rock when fans left, ticket sales fell apart. Venues became smaller. The magic was fade. Peter Criss was the drummer for Just Don't track before permanently giving up. This splits had replaced the cracks. In September, Kiss performed the unimaginable on the 18th of 1983 on MTV. They removed their makeup in real time. After a decade of secrecy, they disclosed our actual faces. Meanwhile, they released the platinum-selling song Lick It Up, having sold more than 1 million copies. But the sound was more forceful, raw, and heavier. Sales increased, the gamble paid off, and fans returned. Gene perceived it as at that point, Kiss had more than 100 licensed goods ranging from action figures to talent boxes generating millions of dollars in sales. The masks had disappeared, but the company was booming. Gan took a vacation in 1908 for Dutt left the music industry and entered Hollywood. He portrayed Luther, the antagonist in their Runaway, a science fiction thriller helmed by Kittian. Michael, he was an insane scientist who killed people with killer robots. Taking inspiration from his demon persona, Gan said phrases with a dash of drama and it as a result of his own inventions. In the meanwhile, Peter Criss returned to the band that was dismissed in 1980 following his addiction became unmanageable. Gan phoned it as an amputation that is required. Carr Eric took over as the new drummer, who was known as Fox. Although the loss was agonizing, it helped them make a new beginning. Kiss in 1989 Hot in the Shade was launched with That Forever, a ballad, reaching number 8 on the Hot 100 on Billboard. It sold more than 500,000 copies, making it their largest struck over the years without makeup. However, the tone was gentle and more romantic than disobedient. Fans were perplexed, yet the sales disagreed. In the background, Gene continued to pursue women. The band's work was interrupted by affairs, chemist meetings. Hollywood was his choice. During the rehearsal process, Eric Carr performed his Little Caesar's initial main vocalist, but it would be his final record prior to retirement. 1991 death. Gene's divergence almost tore everything to pieces. In his autobiography Kiss and Makeup, published in 2001, Gene spoke the whole truth. He had more than 4,800 women slept with him during his time spent with the band. Among the most bizarre there were tales from the late 70s. He was in a relationship with Cher from 1979 to 1980. Butte ultimately fell in love with her best friend, Diana Ross. It began with a straightforward Christmas shopping excursion and evolved into a complete triangle of affection. Cher never pardoned them. The controversy erupted in People magazine, which turned into one of the most well-known treacheries in the history of rock. Both ladies remained friends with Gene, but the harm was irreversible. Next came the greatest twist of all. In 1996, the Kiss's original members got back together. The makeup came back. The performances were completely sold out. All over. They gave performances in 75 cities. Sold 1.2 million copies and performed 92 concerts. Tickets. $143 million was made by the tour. However, it was tight behind the scenes. Criss and Frehley received flat fees of $80,000 for each performance, but Gan and Paul took $110,000 earnings. Then came lawsuits. Older wounds reopened. The achievement was genuine. However, the issues were also present. While they smashed records and were disintegrating once more. The years 2006 to 2012, Gene Simmons in a reality program. Let the cameras follow him. Gene Simmons' Family Jewels is the name. It allowed fans to enter his house on the front row. Life with Shannon, his lifelong partner Tweed, together with their 2 kids, Nick and Sam. The program operated for 7 seasons. This turned into the second biggest hit for A&E. Following The Bounty Hunter Dog. As the series depicted a more gentle, Simmons was more family-oriented, although it omitted majority of his crazy past. Then, in 2008, Asics tape that came to light revealed him with one more female. He filed a lawsuit, claiming that it is an invasion of privacy. However, the most significant turn occurred in 2011 when, having avoided it for 28 years, Jen eventually wed Shannon. The wedding made news. A few viewers expressed disapproval. The performance for putting on such as a phony offer to purchase an football team from Australia. Yet it still made a man who was previously recognized more relatable only for chaos and cosmetics. Gene's corporate empire continued to expand. By the he had applied the Kiss logo in the 2000s to more than 5,000 items. You might locate it on everything ranging from pinball devices to oven coffins to condoms. The name was all over. Sales exceeded $1 billion. Money. In 2017, however, he went going too far. Gene attempted to trademark the well-known hand motion of the devil horns, asserting that he created it in 1974. According to his filing, it was a pose with thumb, pinky and index fingers, and upper, like the sign in America symbol means I love you in the language. Their reaction was immediate. Fans of metal were. He was reminded by critics that individuals such as Ronnie James and John Lennon Doe has been making the motion for a while. Prior to Kiss, days later, Gan abandoned the effort, but the stunt made it was evident how far he was prepared to go. For command, he was followed by trouble in 2 other regions as well. Gene was sued in 2010 by Victoria Jackson, a cosmetics artist at ESPN, who stated that his actions were inappropriate. During a visit at the sports center in 2009 in whole costume, she stated that he humped her and gave her a hug. Gene denied it, that his metal codpiece was the reason for that not possible. Even a countersuit was brought by him to get his name cleared. The situation was ultimately came to an agreement, but that wasn't the single occasion when he was in legal trouble. In 2016, a cook at his rock and he was accused by Bruce Restaurant of groping her. Same thing was said by another woman. In 2017, situations were handled discreetly, settled by 2018, even though he freaked these claims as unfounded. Together, they suggested nevertheless, his wealth kept expanding. In 2015, Gene Simmons was valued at about $400 million. That came from more than simply music. It arrived from the mountains of merchandise for Kiss. Above 100 million albums have been sold continuously. Excursions. He and Paul Stanley in 2012 started a chain of restaurants called Rock and Bruises, which increased to 7. Additionally, he became active in unconventional endeavors such as The Vault, a $2,000 rare recordings compilation published in 2017. Additionally, he joined in 2018 a cannabis business known as Invictus MD, Chief Officer for Evangelism. He fell fourth 2013 LA Kiss Arena football squad, which after a few years folded, and by his solo tour in 2025 alone generated 6 numbers per show without requiring preparation for a complete Kiss. His connection started in 1983 with Shannon Tweed at the mansion of the Playboy. Shannon, who had previously voted 1982's Playmate of the Year, entered Gene's life with the knowledge that he had a reputation. He asserted that there were around 5,000 lovers by 2002. Nevertheless, they continued to create a living together. Nick, their son, was born 1989, and Sophie, their daughter, in 1992. Gene would quip that being married was, according to Groucho Marx, a trap. Although his conduct ultimately forced Shannon to far away, she stormed off the joy in 2011. Calling him a pig in the Baha show. Afterwards, she discovered his collection of clear Polaroids and set them ablaze on air. Fans were stunned at that moment. A change occurred. Gan asked her to marry him on July 26, 2011, in Bees, and they received on October 1st. They got married. Nick was Asafi, the maid of honor, and the GROOMSMAN. That was surprising and heartbreaking, particularly after 28 years of defiance. Their reality program revealed the pivotal moment arrived in season 6 following a picture of Gene with toy models at a 2009 event in Santa Monica. Coaxed Shannon to leave for a while, but entered therapy after the show. She said that she never consented to participate. Ina, the relationship that is open and felt caught off guard. At last, Gene reveled knowing that he was terrified of seduction due to his early years. Though when he proposed to her, he was caught everyone off guard. The duration of the show was 167 episodes and revealed the details of Bay and their partnership alone. It demonstrated the strain and suffering behind theft. Gene's tough man persona in 2018 broken. Flora Clean, his mother passed away on December 5th, aged 93. She survived the Holocaust and had lived through the atrocities of Nazi camps and ended in a gas chamber with her own mother, following their arrival in Israel.